Welcome to the Parenting with Confidence podcast. I am your host, Theresa Alexander Inman, board certified behavior analyst and infant toddler developmental specialist. Today, I am so honored to have as my guest, Miss Jodi Wellman.
Mm.
Woo!
Hello.
Jodi is a leading authority on living lives worth living. As a speaker and facilitator, she helps her clients live squander-free lives. Like, don't waste a moment, people. Don't squander that time because we can't get it back. While they're lucky enough to be above ground. So you know what, Jodi? I'm gonna, like I told you, I'll just read a little bit of this. We'll just do the rest in the notes so we can just
Great.
jump right in.
Yes, let's jump in. Like time's short. We gotta get cracking, right?
Exactly. And I love your 4,000 Mondays.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think it confuses a lot of people, right? Like what are you even talking about? Um, and I'm happy to just quickly share that the reason I called my company that is because we roughly get 4,000 weeks to live in our entire lives. And so I get a little bit nutty about quantifying. I don't know. I get kind of nerdy about I want a countdown timer. And so I do the math. I do it regularly. I actually have a little section on my website if you don't want to do the math that helps calculate how many Mondays you have left on average. And the end result, my hope is that that helps us to go, wait a sec. So I know, for example, I have 1,902 Mondays left in my life. And that makes me say, well, I got to spend these 1,902 Mondays in style. I got to do this right. Whatever that means, to me. But it's a real motivator, that relatively morbid sounding countdown.
Yeah. And you know what? I think if we look at it from a different perspective, yes, okay, some people might think it morbid, but if you knew you had this much time, what would you do with it?
Oh, oh,
Right?
you're
And that's
you're
the
right
point
on
of
to
this,
it.
isn't it?
It totally is. It's like, many of us have been asked that question. If you knew you had a year to live, well, that question to me is always a trick question because most of us would quit our jobs. Most of us would whittle our bank accounts down to actually we would go into debt because who cares? We're dead. Come chase me. But that's not necessarily a real reflection of how we would spend our time. I think it gives us a glimpse. But if you did know you had a finite amount of time, which we rationally know, but we really do a good job of denying that fact. We think, oh, we're going to have all this time later. I'm going to get to do all those things in retirement. Or, oh, I'm going to do all that travel at some other time when work slows down. Or, oh, I'm going to start my business when the timing is right. Time's ticking down, right? And so creating that little bit of a sense of urgency, just a little bit of discomfort is precisely what it can take to give us that little sense of extra priority and meaning to make something of the time that we do have left. Because I may not even have 1,902 Mondays. And I don't know about you. I hope you have lots, but we might not.
We may not exactly. And before we started recording, I shared with you that my son passed at 34 and leaving a 5-year-old daughter. And if he knew he had that time, I mean, what would he have done different? Because who would expect he expected a long life with her. I expected
Oh,
a long life with him.
yeah.
And you talking reminded me of something that I wrote that I read at his celebration, because I was telling you we had a
Okay.
celebration, and it was titled "If I Knew I Had One More Day."
Oh,
Right.
beautiful.
What the things that I would have said to him, the things that he would have done, the things that, just all of that. But I didn't have that one more day. So now I have to embrace all the days that I have. Like yesterday, I was talking to a friend of mine. I was like, oh my goodness, I said I was going to call my uncle and I didn't call him. I need to
Mm.
call him now because I don't know if I'll have tomorrow, if he'll be here tomorrow. So I need to just make that call right now. And,
Yeah.
then I was able to sleep better.
Well, I love what you've highlighted. I think that admittedly it can get it, we could probably go off of a deep end with it. I know I do at times. And yet the spirit of it, I think is spot on. It is that what if, like you said, if there was one more day, what would I have said or done? The gestures, and all this comes down to this huge notion that we do take our lives for granted and we do take our relationships for granted. We do take and this is normal, right? We're meant to adapt as human beings, or else we would be in a constant state of higher stress, even higher stress than we're already in. And so we do need to stop and press the pause button every now and then and do this. Wait a minute. What if this other person in my life wasn't here after tomorrow? What would I want to do differently today to really feel like I hugged them and told them how much they mattered and that I love, and again, we could go OTT with this, over the top. And that's not what this is designed to do, but we can apply this externally to the others in our life that matter. And we can do this internally, which is really the work that I do, which is what about, what about all the stuff that might be on your bucket list? And this isn't all about frivolity and all the pleasure. I do talk a lot about widening our lives with vitality, and that's all the fun and the experiences. But I also talk about deepening our lives with meaning. And so it's not meant to all be like cotton candy and festivals and glasses of wine all the time, although all that sounds excellent. However, it's also about what is going to make you feel like you've had a really fulfilling life. And if you're really focused on the limitation of time, it's called temporal scarcity. That's the psychological science behind it, that when we realize that an asset we have is actually scarce and that it's going to come to an end, it usually does make us see it as more valuable and more precious and worth making the most of. So that's our conversation today. And if we can walk away, and any of your listeners can walk away feeling a little more motivated to go, whoa, wait a minute, what's one thing I can do to live with a little more intention? Then I think we're winning the game of life.
Yes, yes. And marketers use a lot of scarcity to get us to buy things. So
Oh, yeah.
think of your life in that way. Make to empower yourself to do the things and to be the best you can be. And live that life that you feel that has meaning.
Yes. So it's a good point about marketing, and I'll be honest with you, because a lot of my my research and my work is in the school of positive psychology. And I feel a little funny that I'm using the negative side of things in order to rankle, right? Like I'm taking a stick and I'm poking us with it. Like I feel like I do my work on behalf of the Grim Reaper and I joke about it, but like I'm dancing in some pretty morbid territory, right? And yet the thing is, as I've been, a coach, executive coach, life coach, helping teams and individuals for years and years and years. And the truth of it all is that we can talk and dream about the things we might want to do. But again, because we're wired to unfortunately adapt and just sort of let the days and weeks take over and take things for granted, unfortunately, we do need that little poke in the ribs. We do need a little bit of that scarcity that will help us to snap to attention. That's really what this is, right? It's just snapping to attention. And we're not here to tell someone what to do with their time. Like if you've got 1,902 Mondays left, like your idea of an amazing life well lived until you reach the end, skidding into your grave, like that might be very different than mine. And I don't do what you want to do. I'll do what I want to do. He can do what he wants to do. Just do the thing you want to do. Just don't put it off.
Exactly, because tomorrow is not promised. How many things did I say I wanted to do with my son? How many plans we had, and I didn't get to do those things. So I could have just, you know what, this is what we're doing today. Because we don't know how much time we have. So let's embrace now and do the things.
Well, do you mind if I ask you, Theresa, that when you think back on one of the things I wanted to do with my son, I mean, obviously you couldn't fit a lifetime into his short 34 years.
Right.
So I know you can't reflect back and say, I wished I had, spent every living moment with him. But do you mind sharing even an example of something that you wished you had fit in that didn't make the time?
Honestly, and it may seem trivial and really simple, but
Yeah.
my son was again, I still think of him as is. So my son is an artist, and we talked about him creating a piece for me. And we always kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. I can't get that right now.
Oh
you know,
my
and it
goodness.
was just that because we lived when they were younger. I mean, we would drive because we lived in Toronto. We'd drive to Buffalo for dinner, and on the way we'd laugh, we'd cry, they'd sleep. So we had a lot of beautiful moments. You know, we traveled, and there were times where they couldn't call me mom because we're just having too much fun, and people would just think I was crazy, letting my kids just be wild. But it was fun. Like we enjoyed it. So that's the one thing I honestly, if I could take back, it's like, you know what, this is what I want. And I want, do it. I want it like huge, so it can be imposing in the room. And
Ah,
my husband and I talked about it so much before. And then one day he just wasn't around to be able to do that anymore.
mm,
And, I've got a couple of small pieces that he gave me. And he was like, Mom, take this big one. I said, no, I just sell that one, make your money. I'll buy,
yeah,
because we, of course, wanted to pay him for that because I'm like, you're my son, but this is your job. And
yeah,
I said, no, like when you're ready to create something for me, let me know and we'll take care of it. And
right.
yeah.
Right, right. And he didn't, yeah, we, with the benefit of lots and lots and lots of extra time, we will get around to the things we think we're going to do. And yet, let's be honest too. I think he probably had the great intention too of making you your big, incredible, oversized, amazing thing for your walls. And yet, he could maybe very well be alive today, or if we fast forward in the time machine and get him to be 64 years old, the way that we let life work, unfortunately, is that we do keep putting off the things. And so maybe that's an interesting reflection, actually. It's like, what is something that you've been putting off? And it could be that it's a personal goal, right? Like, oh man, I've always been wanting to write that book. Or, oh, it's funny. I just got off the phone with a gentleman from Toronto who's putting off. He's like, I just want to learn how to play the guitar. And
Right.
he's like, I don't know why. I'm like, we don't need to know why. We just know you want to do it. And so what would it look like to just give it a start?
Mhm.
Because I get a little bit fanatical about thinking of getting to the end on our deathbeds. I don't know why I get very vivid about this and imagine being on the deathbed, although I conveniently imagine that it is completely peaceful and pain-free. But in that mode, I think, is there anything that I would have that pang of regret that I didn't embark upon? Because we know that we typically will regret the things that we didn't do way more than the things we did do. So is there
Absolutely.
something that we wish that we will or would wish that,
Mhm.
man, I wished I did that oversized piece of art for my mom, or I wished that I did go and do that missionary trip,
Mhm.
or right? And so only we know those little things that kind of inspire us, but yet we're letting life take over.
Mhm.
But wait a minute, like we got to get control of the reins because we're the ones really in control of our life. And we have a little more discretionary time than I think we sometimes get swept up in believing that we don't. So, what might that look like, to do the thing that you've been putting off? Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's crazy because, I'm actually working on my second book, and my
Oh,
publisher was like, I want it by September 1st. And I was like, I don't have time. But I had to ask him, I said, girl, you spent 2 hours watching TV the other day. You know, you could
I'm
have
right
done
there with you,
something.
honey. Let's talk shows after the podcast. Okay. We'll compare notes. But anyway, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
we can find those moments to do something instead of always waiting to do the big thing when we could
Yeah.
work our way. Because do you agree that if we start doing the small thing, this just actually jumped in my head, but if we
Yep.
start doing those small things, we get some muscle memory built in, and then we can lead to the big things?
Oh, if I could reach through Zoom and give you a giant old hug right now, I'd be doing it because that is exactly, and I will even say that, like, in addition to your profound point, which is that we do actually build the confidence and we build the feeling of, I make things happen and I'm liking the feeling of this and I want more. Because usually we do get a little bit intoxicated in a really good way about that sense of agency over, wow, like I am in control of this life I'm living and I am living a life well lived. What else can I do? That's true. And I'm going to offer just one other perspective because I do think that I might be guilty of this unwittingly too. I talk about living wide, living deep, living these big lives. And I want to be very careful to size this prize because I think we put pressure on ourselves and then on, on others. Like we have to do big things.
Mhm.
And like, I don't know, but that's exhausting. Like we all got a lot on the go. And like, I got a grocery list I'm working on here. And like, we got like life's full.
Mhm.
And yet, what if our lives were just more intentional, small things? Like that is the thing that really does brighten us up. And so, yes, every now and then we want to intersperse some big fun things like, whoa, a big trip to Prague, or whoa, a really neat, a huge accomplishment like running a marathon if you're crazy, or other things. Yeah, sure. But what if it was just that we got really deliberate about dreaming up and scheduling and doing a bunch of cool stuff that just makes us feel alive? Like that to me is a life well lived, rather than letting all of a sudden Monday become Tuesday. Now all of a sudden it's next Thursday already. And now all of a sudden it's September 1st, right?
Right. And what
Yeah.
have you done?
Yeah. Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whew, I have to take all of that in.
Yeah. And now I'm just going to get nosy. Now, are you allowed to tell us about your book?
Oh yeah. Well, the first one was basically is a book about how to help children communicate, and the second one, so that one's specifically for parents. Well, not really. Teachers can use it as well. The second one is how to help your student communicate from
Mm.
birth to 3. So preschoolers, because I want to start at the beginning to empower them, and then we can start writing books about beyond that. But I
Hmm.
thought let's start at the beginning.
I love that. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
A thought leader like you, people need to read what you have to say. Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Jody.
Yeah.
Such a compliment coming from you.
Right back at you. Oh.
Wow. Jody, what's a memento mori? I've never heard of it.
Okay. So it's this old Latin phrase that means remember we must die. And it harks back centuries. So back in the old days, picture like a really old, those old like Renaissance paintings where they would have skulls on their desk and they would have um, art forms where they would literally paint flowers with some of the flower buds and petals starting to decay, all as these reminders that tick tock, honey, like these
Ah,
flower petals are going to die. Or they would even have bubbles, or they would have like hourglasses that represent the falling of the grains of sand. And so over the centuries, memento moris have been used as a real reminder. And many times it was used for sort of religious benefit, but generally it's been about reminder, wake up,
yeah.
So I actually, around me, of course, I'm obsessed, but I have memento moris everywhere. I just like the look of skulls, so that's just maybe a different obsession. But I have hourglasses. I have everything is meant to be that. Oh, right, that little reminder. I even have an app on my phone. This is very bizarre, but it's called We Croak, and it conveniently tells me at 5 random times every single day, remember you are going to die. And
Ah,
it pops up like a very helpful, not so cheerful, but really true reminder. And so
right.
that memento moris are like little reminders that, yep, we're finite.
That's right. So do something fun with what you have now.
Well, amen, sister. Right. Like, what can we, like, when I see that, in a way, I'll be super honest with you. Now I got used to the 5 reminders a day, and now it becomes a little bit like wallpaper, right? And so even in my office where I have the skulls galore and little things galore, you do get used to them. And so you do need to shake it up. And when you shake it up, and that's actually a lot of what I talk about around well-being and lives well lived, they do involve novelty and shaking up our routines, because that wakes us up to the experience of being alive in new ways, because we just get into ruts. It's what we're, again, born and bred to do. So when you see a reminder, or when it is something that comes up, that's that, again, that opportunity to pause and say, is there something I could be doing right now that would make me feel a little more alive? What makes me feel alive? And that's actually the first step, is diagnosing, like, where do you feel already really alive? Do more of those things. Where do you feel a little bit dead? And then maybe those are areas to start to look at. And that, and I don't even know if it's accurate to say the aftermath of COVID. I think we're still in it. But many of us have felt like our lives got pretty small
Mhm.
during COVID. Mine definitely did. And I'm still grappling with the feelings about really wanting to go out as much as I did. And so identifying, hey, I might want to dial up the social stuff, maybe even 15%. No
Mhm.
more than that right now, but maybe if I did that, it might make me feel a little more joy and connection and laughter. And so then it would be when I get reminders and I think, how do I want to spend my time?
Mhm.
And I just did work with a client looking at, say, look at the calendar. How do you want your September to look in your life? You only get one September 2022 in your life. How do you want it to be? And we can't do everything, but
Right.
maybe it means like, so for me, if it meant that I want a little
Mhm.
more social, I would say, okay, well, maybe I would want to go and do a dinner thing with her. And then then you take an initiative to schedule that in rather than all the good intentions we have, right? How many friends do you have or colleagues like where you're like, yeah, let's get together. And then all of a sudden it's 2023,
Right.
right?
Yes.
Like, unless you put it in the calendar, it's not going to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Yes, yes. And thank you, because I love your perspective on living, knowing that that's going to happen later on, or it may happen sooner than we expect. But what happened, like we talked about earlier, between those dashes, you know, when you have, here she was here from 1974 to, you know, 2095 or whatever. But what did that look like? What
Yeah.
impact did we make? What are the things, like you said, missions? What do we want to do? So,
Yeah.
it's just, people, this is not to be sad. This is just to
Mhm.
remind you that it's going to happen and
Mhm.
not take your life for granted.
Well, you make a good point around you just reminded me of really this idea about legacy. And I think about the people that, you mostly interact with, so parents and teachers
Mhm.
that, ooh, well, first of all, like profoundly important people in the lives of many other people, right? Like raising the children of today
Mm.
and tomorrow is an enormous job. And when I think about there's another exercise which we've all heard of before. It's like imagining what people will say for you when you die. What
Yes.
would your obituary or what would your eulogy look like, sound like? Or if you were a fly on the wall in your memorial service, what do you want people to be saying about you? And we can be more deliberate and craft with intention what we want our legacy to be. And so I work with a lot of teachers who are who kind of do the thing where we're going through the motions and we all have our way of working, our personal brand, how you show up. And then sometimes there is actually value in doing the wait. I'm not going to be doing this forever. In fact, then we do the math about, well, how many more years are you going to be teaching? When is your retirement? Okay, wow, you've got 12 years left. What would make you so proud? How do you want to be these next dozen years of your life? If you're lucky, you got that many.
Mhm.
And when you look back and think, wow, this is the legacy I left. This is how I want the kids to describe. This is how I want the parents of the kids to describe how I was for them in their life. That can shape how we do what we do, right?
Yeah,
Beginning with the end in mind.
exactly. And what kind of questions do you get parents asking themselves?
The parents of
Of
like just in
children.
general,
Yeah.
parents of
Yeah.
kids. Oh, once we sift and sort through just all the stress and the angst and the concern,
Mhm.
it's usually about how do it well, it's actually it falls into two categories. It's an interesting question and it's maybe a convoluted answer. So one is along the lines of what I was alluding to around how do I want to be as this role model for my kids?
Mhm.
How do I want to teach them that life is what you make it, seize the day, don't delay? So there's that conscious thought of, whoa, I'm setting the pace here for my young little sweet pea over here. So there's that. And then I will say that there is actually a whole other chunk. And of the folks I work with, most of them are parents, like most adults I find are parents. And so they um depending on the age of their kids, they're just trying to have their own life and carving it out as like their identity is always going to be like yours always will be, even with your son at 34 moving on. You're always, I mean, maybe you have other kids, but you're always going to be his mom, right?
Yes.
So aside from that's just like the permanent identity of being this parent, the thing is, what about you and your joy and your fulfillment and the things that matter to you that may or may not involve your kids? And so it's about, I'll be honest, a lot of the moms I work with are really hard pressed to even identify the things that light them up because all they've been doing for years is helping light other people up. It's a
Mm-hmm.
noble mission, but then you get lost in the shuffle, right?
Right.
And so sometimes it's, what about you identifying, like taking a couple hours and go to Starbucks or go to your favorite place by the water, or just go in a closet if you have to just like lock yourself in the bathroom, but identify what is the stuff that lights me up? What brings me joy? What makes me feel like my life is widened with vitality? What makes me deeper with meaning? And ideally, I say make a list of 30 things. And of that list of 30 things, please make sure that at least 20, 25 of them are things you can actually do without like, yeah, of course, it brings us joy to do international travel or to do big things, but we're trying to come up with like your recipe for a life well lived right now in a typical week or a typical month. And then your job is to look at that list of 25 like actual, applicable things and intersperse them in your life so that you're living a life that makes you feel fantastic, that actually then makes you a better parent because you're more on fire, rather than feeling like, oh, I gave up all my hobbies and I don't have any social life anymore. I'm not having any more fun. Well, that's going to take a toll, right? On the way that you are as a parent or as a partner or as a friend. So let's stop and let's just get you a little more alive. And then that does wonders for all the other relationships.
Wow, we have to stop there because that is so powerful. I don't want to water it down with anything.
We're going to wreck it if we keep talking.
Like, remember that, people. I hope you wrote that down, rewind it, and write it down because that is so powerful. My goodness. Thank you. No, I normally ask if there's one last thing you want to say, but that, what you just said,
Okay.
gosh, like exclamation, exclamation, exclamation.
Well, then we will wrap that there then. Let's not
Yes,
wreck it.
yes, yes. So, Jodi, with that, I say thank you, thank you, thank you. And how can people find you?
Oh, well, thank you for asking. I can be found at 4000mondays.com. And there's a contact there if people want to reach out to me personally, or there's lots of resources and blog posts and just things for inspiration. So, yeah, 4000mondays.com. Thank you, Theresa.
You are welcome, and thank you for showing up and inspiring us. I mean, I have goosebumps, Miss Jodi. This has been so beautiful. Thank you, thank
Oh,
you, thank you, and be blessed.
you too. You're a pleasure.
Thank you.